This video was made possible by my lovely patrons, helping support me so I can make videos like this a reality. Huge thanks to you guys. Y'all are real ones. When playing a fighting game, you really want to play something that most other people are playing too. You want a decent population and a good netcode so that you have easy access to games without really making an effort to look for them. And there are two words that you don't want to hear to describe a game you love. Dead game. But what constitutes as a dead game? What makes a game truly dead? Let's try to define that, shall we, as we look for examples of such games. This next segment might be a bit rough, but focusing on PC, I'm going to start name-dropping some games that might fit into the dead game category, starting with... We need to face the facts. Melty Blood's population is very low for a game that just launched last year, not even making it to the top 10 most played fighting games on Steam right now. Recently, the devs dropped a new batch of DLC, free DLC, and some updates. If I was to wear a tinfoil hat, one could assume they're using the free DLC as a lure to get players to return to the game, and admittedly, it's a pretty effective tactic. There's also the dreaded issue that's been plaguing the Type Lumina player base. You either loved it, or you hated it. And I will not talk about it because I am not someone you should ask when it comes to game balance, especially when it comes to this game. I love playing the game, but I'm just not that well tuned to how it ticks as a whole. The elephant in the room is outside the scope and we won't talk about it anymore. However, the devs are still updating. The game is still actively being supported in present day, and it's a main game for EVO this year. Surely, the game isn't dead. Just because it's got a low player population doesn't mean that it's done for. So let's look at another culprit. Maybe it's the netcode that's the problem, the characterization of a dead game. Now let's look at... I really want Grand Blue Fantasy Versus to flourish and be popular, but it's really not doing either of those, and it shows, being at a lower player count than Type Lumina, and running on delay-based netcode. I've touched on it before in another video, but this game is the unfortunate victim of astoundingly bad timing. It was clearly made with offline play in mind, and its competitive scene almost immediately shut down due to the start of the global pandemic. In its pursuit to gain an audience by being both a footsie-centric game and a game that's more accessible than most, it's managed to gain a negligible audience, a lower than average population. Or has it? If you're an astute observer, you'll realize that, just like Type Lumina, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus is another main game for EVO 2022. It still is being supported by its developers as well, their roadmap stating that the game is slated to have a gameplay overhaul this summer. And, as a rollback enthusiast myself, while I do have my doubts that they'll retroactively add rollback to the game, I won't be opposed to it happening. To add to the netcode factor of what defines a dead game, Tekken 7, Soul Calibur 6, and Dragon Ball FighterZ all play on delay, and they're some of the most played games on Steam right now. And no, don't give me that Tekken is 3 nonsense. If Tekken is rollback, it's so badly implemented it might as well be delay. I love Tekken. It's the fighting game series that made me get serious about fighting games, but come on. Give us real rollback. So we've ruled out that having dev support means the game isn't dead. We've also ruled out that netcode, while being important, isn't as big of a factor as you'd think, even if rollback should be the standard these days. So, what if we check out the game that no longer has dev support? An older version of the wildly celebrated Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. I'm talking about. Thanks to emulation software in Fightcade, more and more people have easy access to older fighting games, playable online thanks to rollback netcode. Among the playable ones in Fightcade, Second Impact is a game that not a lot of people play these days, and it's clear why. Its predecessor, Third Strike, is a game that many consider to be the pinnacle of the series. So why are people still playing Second Impact to this day? In my search to find the answer, I've interviewed someone that some of the folks in the Second Impact community consider a living laboratory. Heather. She's been kind enough to help me figure out what makes Second Impact tick.
I'll be honest, I don't really talk to the community that much, but there is a small and somewhat dedicated community for the game itself that is starting to put a lot of effort into labbing the game and finding more optimal like combos and situations and whatnot for the game. But this was more recent and it wasn't the case before. I think if you enjoy Thirst Strike, it would be an interesting experience to look into Second Impact, see how different the game is, because there are a lot of differences between the two, especially in how neutral is approached throughout the games. And I think being able to see that difference would be, at the very least, an interesting little fun way to spend your time. But if you like the game a whole lot and you feel like learning it, I would totally recommend it. You have a small little community that will be happy to play the game with you. It frequents around 18 to 20 players in the lobby at any given moment, which is a lot more than what it was before, which was 2 sometimes. At the end of the day, I don't think there's much of a logical reason I could really give other than I just find Second Impact more fun than most fighting games I play. And I don't think there has to be any complex reason or anything that 2i might offer. I think if you're looking for an incredibly explosive fighting game where you can make one mistake and die for it, or you see someone make one mistake and absolutely kill them for it, I think 2i might be the game for you, especially considering how important both defense and offense is, because neutral in that game is incredibly explosive, that both the way you approach defense and offense are completely different extremes, because you'll be wanting to block all the time, but you'll also want to be forcing situations at every moment as well.
Before we finish, please humor me because I want to talk about chess. It's a game that's kind of hard to get into. The strategies have mostly been figured out. There's pieces and rules that I actually want nerfed or streamlined, but that's never going to happen because the devs have already abandoned the game for over 200 years. But that's okay, because despite these hurdles, chess is still one of the best, balanced, most competitive games out there. Despite the steep barrier of entry for competition, there's no such thing as being too late to start playing the game. And I guess that's where the dead fighting game comparisons end, because chess also happens to be one of the most played board games in the world. But if you're gonna have a takeaway from this video, it should be that games are only ever truly dead if you're not there to play them.
Yeah, it's like, as long as someone is playing, I don't think a game is dead. So my whole idea with fighting games, I don't think fighting games die, I think they just go to sleep. Until it's awake again, so to say.
Well said, Heather. Well said. If you've made it all the way to the end, I'm curious. What games do others consider dead that you absolutely love? Let me know in the comments, and I'll give them a try if they can. If you'd like more content like this, or if you want to support my endeavors in video creation, please consider subscribing and maybe backing me on Patreon. I have exclusive updates on what I'm doing and working on in there. Thank you for watching. Y'all have a good one.